ZZ hands a gold bar to Peter Schiff and asks him a simple question. Can you tell me if this gold bar is real or fake? Peter looks at it, pauses, and then say, I don't know. This happens on December 4th, 2025 in Dubai, on the main stage at Binance Blockchain Week. And what happens next caught a lot of people off guard. On one side, you have CZ, the founder of largest crypto exchange in the world. On the other side, you have Peter Schiff, probably one of the most well-known and most hardcore gold guys in the US. This moment is way more important than it looks. Think about it. A guy who spent his entire career defending gold couldn't confidently tell whether the gold right in front of him was real. At that point, this stops being a gold versus Bitcoin argument. It turns into a much bigger question. What do we actually trust today? If you're new to the channel, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Johnny Zhang. I'm the founder of Premium. I spent more than a decade working in the US real estate and asset management, and most of my time is spent thinking about just a few things. How assets hold value, how they produce cash flow, where the risks actually are, and how all of that changes across different market cycles. I'm not here to defend crypto. I'm not here to defend gold. I'm coming at this from an assets allocation perspective, from the angle for helping investors make better decisions over the long term. In this video, I want to walk you through what's really going on behind the debate, what gold actually is, and what Bitcoin actually is, what problems each one solves, and just as important, what problems they don't solve. And I'll tell you this upfront, there's another assets category that a lot of global capital is quietly moving into. It's more flexible than gold and a lot more stable than Bitcoin. And if you stick around till the end, you'll see exactly why. So let's simplify everything. Just two basic questions. What is gold and what is Bitcoin? Once you see this clearly, you'll realize they were never designed to solve the same problem in the first place. First, what gold really is, and why humans have trusted it for thousands of years. Let's start with gold. Gold isn't a modern financial invention. It didn't even come from Wall Street. It didn't come from central banks. Gold is one of the earliest and the most widely accepted stores of value in human history. If you go back thousands of years, ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, China, India, different civilizations, different cultures, no coordination, and yet they all landed on the same thing. Gold. That wasn't an accident. The reasons are actually very practical. Gold is scarce, but not impossible to find. It doesn't rot. It doesn't rust. It doesn't decay. You can divide it. You can melt it. You can store it for a very long time. And most importantly, you can't just create gold out of thin air. Before central banks existed, before computers, before the internet, gold's physical properties made it naturally suited to act as a ledger of value. It didn't require trust in a government, or a system, or a piece of software. Asset itself was the trust. You've probably heard the term, the gold standard. Let me explain that in plain English. Under the gold standard, a country's currency could be exchanged for gold at a fixed rate. In other words, the government promised you something very specific, that the paper money in your hands wasn't just paper. It represented a real amount of gold sitting somewhere in the reserve. After World War II, this idea was formalized under the Bretton Woods system. Here's how it worked. The US dollar was pegged to gold at a fixed price, $35 per ounce. Other countries then pegged their currencies to the US dollar. That's how the dollar became the center of the global financial system. But there was a problem. As the US printed more dollars and more dollars spread around the world, people started asking a very uncomfortable question. Does the US actually have enough gold to back all of this? And in August of 1971, President Nixon answered that question. He suspended the convertibility of dollars into gold. This moment is often called closing the gold window, and it effectively marked the beginning of the ends of the Bretton Woods system. This is the bigger historical context behind the moments you saw earlier with CZ and the gold bar. Once the gold stopped backing the money directly, its role changed. Gold didn't disappear. Its role changed from being a monetary anchor to now being a symbol of value preservation. So when we talk about gold today, we need to be very clear about its role. Gold is not designed to make you rich quickly. Gold is a defensive asset. Historically, it acts as a hedge against inflation against currency debasement, against financial crisis. It protects purchasing power when things break. It's not there to outperform everything else. It's there to not collapse when everything else does. And that's the core logic of the gold argument. Number 2, gold's performance. What the numbers actually tell us. Let's talk about performance for a second. Not opinions, not narratives, just numbers. Under the Bretton Woods system, gold was fixed at $35 an ounce. Fast forward to 2025. The average price of gold is around $3,400 an ounce. And by late 2025, spot gold pushed past $4,300 an ounce. So yes, over the long term, gold clearly goes up. But here's the key point most people miss. Gold doesn't behave like a growth asset. It behaves like insurance. When inflation spikes, gold tends to hold up. When currencies weaken, gold tends to hold value. When financial systems shake, gold usually doesn't collapse. That's why gold investors say this: I don't need it to be fastest. I just need it to survive. Gold isn't there to make you rich. It's there to make sure you don't get wiped out. That's its job. And this is important because once you understand that, you stop asking the wrong questions. Gold isn't competing to beat tech stocks or crypto or venture capital. It plays defense, and it's played that role for thousands of years. Now let's switch gears, because Bitcoin didn't come from the same place at all. Number 3, what Bitcoin is and why it showed up in 2009. Bitcoin didn't appear because someone wanted a cooler asset. It showed up because the trust broke. In 2008, the global financial system cracked. Banks failed. Governments bailed them out. Central banks printed massive amounts of money. And for lots of people, that was the moment they realized something uncomfortable. The system only works as long as you trust the people running it. In that environment, someone using the name Satoshi Nakamoto published the Bitcoin white paper. And the design was radical. Not fancy, radical. Bitcoin said no central authority, no government's control, no banks in the middle. The supply is fixed. 21 million coins, that's it. Anyone can verify the system. Anyone can participate. Transactions are public, and once recorded, it cannot be changed. If gold represents scarcity in the physical world, Bitcoin represents scarcity in the digital world. That's the real breakthrough. It wasn't about price. It wasn't about speculation. It was about removing trust from institutions and embedding it into code. Number 4, Bitcoin performance and the trade-off is volatility. Now let's talk about performance again. Since 2009, Bitcoin has gone through multiple massive rallies, multiple brutal crashes. It had dropped 70 to 80% more than once. That's real risk. There's no way around it. But here's also a fact. Over the last decade plus, Bitcoin long-term returns has significantly outperformed gold and most traditional assets. So both things are true. Bitcoin offers extraordinary upside, and at the same time, it comes with extreme volatility. This is not a stable asset. Bitcoin is high risk, high volatility, but potentially very high rewards. So when people argue gold versus Bitcoin, they usually miss the point. They're not even solving the same problem. Gold protects purchasing power. Bitcoin challenges monetary control. One is slow, one is fast, one is stable, one is violent. And neither of them is perfect. Number 5. Putting gold and Bitcoin on the same table. So if you put gold and Bitcoin on the same table and really look at them honestly, you come to a simple conclusion. Neither of them is a perfect asset. Gold's problem has never been that it has no value. The problem is that it's heavy, it's slow, and it relies on intermediaries. If you want to verify gold, you need testing. If you want to store gold, you need votes. If you want to move gold across borders, you need institutions, customs, and layers of trust. Gold works, but it doesn't scale cleanly in the digital world. Bitcoin, on the other hand, solves lots of those problems. Verification is instant. Transfer is global. Ownership is clear. But Bitcoin has its own issue: price volatility. That volatility makes it very hard for most families to comfortably hold it as a long-term core asset. So you end up with this contrast. One asset is too old. One asset is too new. One is extremely stable. One is extremely aggressive. And that's exactly why something very important happened during that debate with CZ. Number 6, the detail most people missed. Here's the part a lot of people overlooked. Peter Schiff, a man who has spent his entire career defending gold, has started tokenizing gold. Think about that for a second. This is not a technical upgrade. This is the position shift. Even the most traditional gold advocates now accept one reality. If an asset is not digital, it struggles to exist inside the future financial system. And this part matters. Schiff didn't suddenly fall in love with crypto. He didn't become a Bitcoin maximalist. He tokenized gold to fix gold's weaknesses. Gold didn't change. Its value logic didn't change. The wrapper changed. The way it shows up in the system changed. The question is no longer, should I buy Bitcoin? The real question is, should assets become digital? Number 7, from gold tokens to real world assets, RWA. Once you accept that gold can be tokenized, the next question is unavoidable. If gold can be tokenized, what about real estate? What about debt? What about assets that actually produce cash flows? This is where RWA comes in, real world assets. Let me be very clear here. RWA is not about launching tokens. It's not about speculations. It's not about turning assets into memes. RWA does one simple thing. It takes real existing assets and places them inside a compliant digital structure that allows them to be verified, rationalized, and transferable. The assets doesn't change. The way people participate does. Number 8, why real estate is the easiest example. I've personally spent the last few years working right at this intersection. And if there's one asset that makes this easiest to understand, it's real estate. Historically, you have two options. Option 1, you buy a property yourself. You put up all the capital, you manage everything, and you take on all the risk. Option 2, you invest through private funds. High minimums, long lockups, almost no liquidity. And for most people globally outside of the US, both options are closed. Number 9, tokenization does not change the asset. This part is critical. Under a tokenized structure, real estate is still real estate. The building doesn't change. Rent doesn't change. The legal ownership doesn't disappear. Nothing gets virtualized. What changes is access, participation, who gets to be involved, and at what scale. Tokenization allows assets to be digitalized, split into smaller units, and accessed under a compliance framework by investors of different sizes. This doesn't make assets lighter, it makes the entry points more rational. Number 10, zooming out, this is the real shift. This is why I say this conversation was never about picking sides. Gold has a role, Bitcoin has a role, but the bigger story is how real assets are evolving. Gold answered the past, Bitcoin tested the digital future, and RWA is about bringing real cash flowing assets into a more efficient and transparent structure. So when people ask gold or Bitcoin, I think that's already the wrong question. The real question is, in what form do assets exist going forward? Gold represents value. Bitcoin enables digital transfer. And RWA is about letting real assets participate in a system that's already more open, more flexible, and more accessible. 11, a rational investment perspective. But before I wrap this up, I want to be very clear about one thing. This is not me telling you to go all in on any single asset. This is not how serious investing works. Good investing isn't about picking sides. It's about understanding what problem does each asset actually solve, and then allocating based on your own risk tolerance, time horizon, and objectives. Gold has a role, Bitcoin has a role, and tokenized real-world assets has a role too. Gold protects purchasing power, Bitcoin enables digital sovereignty, and RWA focuses on something very specific, allowing real income-producing assets to exist inside a more efficient and a more transparent structure. For a lot of people, this isn't about chasing returns. It's about access to asset classes they were never able to touch before. Number 12, the bigger picture. If you zoom out, this is what's really happening. We're not watching a battle between assets. We're watching a shift in form. How assets are represented, how they are owned, how people participate in them. Gold was the answer for thousands of years. Bitcoin is an experiment of the digital age. But the long-term story is about how real assets move into structures that are more flexible, more transparent, and more inclusive. 13, closing thoughts. So the real question isn't, should I buy gold or Bitcoin? The real question is, what form will assets take going forward? That's the lens I want you to think through. So over the past few years, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Real-world assets, tokenization structure, and why they're quietly reshaping how people invest. I put those thoughts together in a short ebook. No hype, no predictions. Just a clear explanation of how assets get tokenized, how ownership is structured, and how participation works under a compliant framework. If you want a copy, leave comments with RWA. I'll send it to you. That's it. Thank you for watching. See you next time.